You may have been thinking, if you've seen any of these video blogs, that's all well and good, but where's the relevance? Where's the social relevance to this? Because there's such momentous things going on right about now. Um, so I thought I would address that issue. Um, this here that I have on my little desk in front of me is the 1870 volume of the Portland Transcript. I have to give a little bit of background. Matthew lived in Portland for many years, and he contributed to the Portland Transcript even after he had moved to Boston. He contributed to this paper up until 1875. So this is 1870. And this is the one character that he was known for historically. And the reason for that is that he was exposed as the author of this anti-slavery satire. This has to do with a character named Ethan Spike, who's a backwoods fellow from Maine, a little fictional town called Hornby in the actual county of Oxford. And Oxford is still conservative to this day. So apparently it was quite conservative then, and it was pro-slavery, which is kind of hard to imagine now, but it was. And Matthew's character, Ethan Spike, would hold forth in letters to the editor periodically. They got to be quite popular. That's the one thing he was famous for in his day. So by 1870, of course, the Civil War was over, but the white supremacists were not about to let blacks have their rightful place. So Matthew, even though he'd been exposed in 1857, so people knew who he was, what he couldn't stay silent on occasion. So something must have happened. There must have been something in the news, and he decided to have Ethan Spike give a white supremacist speech. So there's another one I'd like to share at some point, and that's his open letter to Abraham Lincoln during the war, trying to urge Lincoln to free the slaves, which Lincoln didn't initially want to do, and Matthew went public urging him to do that, and also urging him to allow black men to serve in the Union Army. That's for another day. So I'm going to read this as my contribution to the situation. So this is the June 11th, 1870 edition of the Portland Transcript. It's under a title name, it's under a category of humorous. It's reported for the Portland Transcript as though it was an actual report. And this is, the remarks of E. Spike, Esquire, in favor of the 17th Amendment before the Hornby Board of Trade. Now, all of these were written in a heavy New England accent. And I can't imitate that. I would be embarrassed to try. Matthew obviously could do it quite well. And also these written Ethan Spike stories were full of malapropisms and deliberate misspellings and what we might call Freudian slips, that the character would make. And I won't be able to point those out as I read. But I think we'll get enough of it. It's very, very tough reading because it's all in bad spelling and dialect. If I was really going to read it smoothly, I'd probably have to practice it all day. So I'm just going to stumble through it the best I can. But you'll get a sense of what he was writing. Feller citizens, this are a solemn and momentary occasion. See, they're already you've got one. Momentary is like the opposite of what he really means to say. So that's the kind of malapropisms we've got in here. Feller citizens, this are a solemn and momentary occasion. As I reverentially approach it, I feel solemn and momentous myself. My bosom heaves with sanguinarious emotions, and the very buttons onto my nether garments is mutinous. Feller citizens, what are the 17th Amendment? It are an act entitled an act, which is also supplementary to an act, which is further supplementary to several other acts, and which repeals all other acts, except the acts of the apostles, whatsoever and wheresoever inconsistent herewith. In short, feller citizens, it is an act in addition to an act for the further protection of the great Anglo-Saxon race. Feller citizens, We has already abundant acts for the protection of women's rights, our dumb animals, niggers, and I'm going to go ahead and use the N-word in here because it's historical, so forgive me for that. Niggers, robbings, shad, alewives, and domestic manufactures. But it has remained for this enlightened community to assert the wrongs of and claim protection for a race which nobody else seems ever to have thought on. What are these wrongs? Webster, unabridged, and Mrs. Wood's novels wouldn't contain the half on 'em. It's allers been a persecuted and downtrodden race. Look clean back to the time when the race were invented, away to them old feudal bearings who was the fust of the race. Even then, sich were the prejudice agin 'em that them old feudaliers had keeped shut up in castles, only going out occasionally to rob and steal. And such was the cruelty of the barbarians around them that they was not unfrequently compelled to commit murder, arson, and rape afore their wants was supplied. Think for a moment, my friends, of the situation of them innocents, and, if convenient, bedoozle their pleasant memories with a tear or two, whilst I adjourn for a few minutes for refreshments, which means, of course, alcohol. Where next do we find this, like 3 asterisks, which means some time has elapsed? Where next do we find the subjects of our few feeble remarks? Here, sir, in the birthplace of E pluribus unum, habeas corpus, hail Columbi, that was a patriotic song, and various other virtues. Here, where the eagle never leaves off screaming defiance to tyrants, where the banner of freedom floats day and night, where every man sets onto his own dunghill and don't care a cuss. Exiles from persecution to home, the race here sought up another, and brewed their own whiskey, but the end was not yet. Soon they was obliged to leave their peaceful avocations to destroy the red aboriginals, which would persist in squatting on the territory which the Lord their God had gin 'em. They was also compelled to burn a good many old women for riding on broomsticks and other games of that sort. Time, feller citizens, will not allow me to recount the half of the sufferance of these New World martyrs, how they was obliged to hang Quakers, and Matthew, of course, had been raised Quaker, and bore holes in the ears and tongues of Baptists and other heathen who wouldn't think as they did. I must hasten to say a word of the great suffering. Actuated by high and holy motives, they had sent out at great expense and brought from the nations which sought in darkness thousands of benighted heathens to a land of light, to a land flowing with milk and molasses, in order to save their souls, S-O-L-E-S. But the snutty cusses was hard to save, and nothing but unlimited outlays for the means of grace, such as whips, thumbscrews, and bloodhounds, would bring them within the pale of true religion. Yet they persevered, and arter long wrastling had succeeded in bringing the majority of the woolly cusses to a hopeful sense of their wickedness. Fiscally, F-I-S-I-C-K, too, the improvement was no less striking. Thousands of them heathens, naturally the color of original sin, was changed to gray, yaller, and even pure white. Now looky here. Was they permitted to sit down under their vines and enjoy the fruits of their unparalleled sacrifices and unspeakable wrastlings? No, they wasn't. Another race, claiming to be Angoles, but which was really a mixture of Puritans and black Republicans, swarmed down upon this pastoral Elysium, turned the niggers loose, and broke up the harmony of the happiest of happy families. Now, feller citizens, and I may say feller citizens, since the amendment preceding this ere now before the meeting, I may venture to thus designate my feller citizens of the blank blank blank, I dare say feminine, nor yes masculine, and as the 16th Amendment doesn't provide a new classification, shall I say, doubtful gender, I allude, of course, to them which was once known as the fair sects, S-E-C-T-S, I solemnly appeal to all in this hall without distinction of color, sects, crinoline, which is what women used to wear, paper collars, hairpins, or whiskers, to sympathize with the downtrodden, the persecuted, the lowly, the mean. Will you stand idly by and see rights wrested from that glorious race, which, coming from their bright hums in the irrefragable and gregarious mountings of Caucasus, spread over the whole earth as an enemy of locusts, driving out the heathen, inventing steam, elastic telegrams, democracy, whiskey, and other blessings too numerous to mention? Why, fellow citizens, has anybody got a morsel of tobacco about his trousers? Thank you. Why, fellow citizens, don't your hearts bile when you read of niggers into Congress, while such as J. Davis wanders humbless orphans in furrin parts? Why, sir, I personally knows, down in old North Caroline, a pure, unmitigated Angoli, which his name is Amos Sproul, just as clever a critter when he ain't tight as you'd wanter know, tight means drunk, which once owned 3 niggers which he worked into the tar business. And now 2 of 'em, them cussed darkies, owns the place and works him into the tar business. Though Amos tells me he has better victuals and clothes than when the machine was run t'other way. But what of that? What's victuals and clothes compared with eternal principles? I knows a still more distresseder case in that same neighborhood. Years ago, Gad Peters had 40 likely niggers and made more tar than anybody else in them parts. Gad hisself were a whole-souled feller, S-O-L-E-D, souled feller, allers free with his whiskey and tobacco, could ride faster, swear louder and longer than any man in the state, could hit a coon's nose or a nigger's eye at 60 rods 7 times out of 6, and was 7 times out of 6, and was in every respect an amiable citizen and altogether lovely. Well, what is Gad's status quo about this time? The last time I were down there, Gad were living with one of his former niggers under a dugout turned up agin a tree. He were unable to get about on account of an old bite from one of his own dargs while hunting this identical nigger. The nig raised a few tedders and guarding truck, and by shooting a coon or a buzzard now and again manages to keep Gad from starving. But, says Gad to me, the tears running down his venerable though considerably dirty face, Gad never thought much of water for any purpose, that dern nigger won't get me a morsel of whiskey, though he plainly sees that on account of lacking that panacea I dies daily. I dust right afore his derned eyes, and he a-knowing all the time that I got this bite trying to reform him. That's gratitude for ye, continued Gad, trying to get up, but falling into the fire which the nigger pulled him out. These are only a few of many. Had I the time, I could harrow your souls and make the very hairs onto your head stand on end like quills onto a frightful concubine. Feller citizens, let us perorate. Shall the sooty posterity of Cain, Ham, Shembednego, and Judas Iscariot run a white man's government? Shall niggers revel and toe the halls of our national legislator and comb their lousy wool in the honored seats of Davis and Wigfall? And he quotes, which the gods wanter destroy, die early. Look abroad over the wide canopy of the sunny south and see the desolations of abominations a-settin onto its 1,000 altars. Niggers in the general courts, niggers in the jury box, nigger everywhere, and even the white ermine of the bench giving place to black wool. And he quotes, possum up a gum tree, nigger in a holler. Proud bird of my country, symbol of multifarious destiny, where dost thou hide? Dost thou sleep while death and hell foller outer a nigger onto a pale horseback seeking whom they might devour somebody? Or hast traitors salted thy tail and put out thy person gaze like the black Republicans down in Judy did Samson? Bird of my country, Lord of the air and king of the poultry, like as he did, pull down the pillows and smother the uncircumcised cusses. And he quotes, I knows a bank whereon the wild thyme grows. Emblem of e pluribus and terror of the world, flop thy mighty pinions and light onto the nasty nigger like a June bug onto a caterpillar, tear his worsted and otherwise reduce him to his normal and patriarchal situation. Then, and not till then, will lions pastor with the sheep and children play with speckled cantatrices. And he quotes to end, there is a destiny which taken at the flood shapes our ends. That's what I was writing in 1870. Again, another time I may share the open letter to Abraham Lincoln. I'm trying not to make these too long. This is already too long. But there's my little contribution. I haven't changed my views in the slightest since then. I generally don't get into politics because my guru Meher Baba told his followers to stay out of politics. But since this is historical and I'm sharing Mathew Franklin's past life work, I thought I would just happen to share this one. You all have a nice day, and we can all look forward to an interesting and hopefully safe inauguration.